The last several days, we have had to witness shocking, devastating video coming out of the Middle East after Hamas militants issued a surprise attack on Israel. Nearly more than 2,000 people have been killed on both sides, Israelis as well as Palestinians there in the Gaza Strip. 22 Americans have also died. Israel, what they've done is they've responded in kind. They have banned electricity, water, and other items coming into the Gaza Strip. Other countries are enforcing a blockade as well. They are attacking and going after many of the Hamas strongholds there in the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and National Unity Party leader Benny Gantz says the government will not pass any laws or make any decisions that do not concern the conduct of war. Now, President Joe Biden, he, of course, has also been speaking out. He spoke again today, making it clear that the United States stands strongly and firmly with Israel. This has led to a lot of back and forth on Capitol Hill. You also have members of both parties talking about what needs to be done to actually provide additional resources to Israel in this battle. So many different things have been going on. You've had various universities. Various students at the university has been issuing statements, some of them highly critical. You've got folks who've also been criticizing, they've been criticizing members of Congress. Folks are making decisions. Do they stand with Israel? Do they stand with the Palestinians? You've got critics of Black Lives Matter Chicago for what they've been posting. And so we've just seen, again, a significant number of folks speaking on both sides, multiple sides of this issue. It has led to a lot of consternation as we're seeing again as these bodies are being pulled out of the rubble. We're seeing reports and unfortunately a lot of disinformation on social media as well, trying to understand exactly what is going on over there as we speak. Here's President Biden speaking a little bit earlier. Give me 1 second, all right, folks. Let me just pull this. Let me just pull this up. Here we go.
I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever. Anyway, but there are countries in the region that are trying to be of some help, including Arab nations that are trying to be of some help. So,
Doug Emhoff, who is, of course, the second gentleman who is married to Vice President Kamala Harris, he is also Jewish. He also spoke today. Here's what he had to say.
You're all hurting. The entire Jewish community is hurting. I'm hurting. We grieve with you. We stand with you. But thank God we have the steady leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris during this unthinkable time in our history. Their moral compass, their calm, their empathy are what we need in this time of crisis. And we saw that yesterday when President Biden, with Vice President Harris and Secretary Blinken by his side, powerfully addressed the nation and made clear to the world that Israel has the United States' unwavering support. Our president and vice president are making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself. We are grateful for their leadership and support for Israel at this exceptionally difficult time. We also acknowledge and address how these events will impact us as Jews.
All right, joining us right now is national security expert Dr. Nola Haynes. So, Doc, glad to have you here. So, all right, where do we even begin? First of all, this started with this surprise attack by Hamas against Israel. Some 5,000 rockets were fired. So I want to do this here. a lot of people really have no understanding of anything in this region. So let's first do this here. Explain to folks the difference between Hamas and the PLO. And so when you see people talking about they stand with Palestine, it doesn't mean that they are defending Hamas. So explain to people who don't quite understand this region at all.
Thank you so much for doing this segment. It's very important, and I think it's important to talk to everybody about what's happening, especially folks in our community. And that is a great starting point. You know, we can go all the way back to 1948 when the State of Israel was even founded. This is how far this goes back. It goes all the way back there. And there are different times in the 60s and the 70s where you had different skirmishes. There was a Six-Day War in 1967, 1972. There are so many instances that you can point to, but nothing quite like this on this scale. So in 2006, Hamas came into power in Gaza. I want to be very clear about them having power in Gaza. There's the West Bank, and there are other parts where Palestinians are, in Lebanon and Jordan. In 1948, when Israel became a state, and a lot of Palestinians were forced to go elsewhere, they migrated to many different parts. So we're talking about the Gaza Strip. So they came into power in 2006, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster since then. They ousted the Fatah party that was there, and then also the PLO. And Hamas got started with Egypt's Brotherhood, which was kind of an organization that dates. I forget exactly when they came into power, but it was a pretty powerful organization. But then they broke off, and then they became Hamas. So they've had a presence, I would say, probably since the 80s, and they slowly gained power. And they officially came into power in 2006.
So when you say coming to power, if people have to understand, that was an election. And this was when President George W. Bush was there. And there were a number of people who were trying to explain to the Bush administration, do not move forward with this election. Hamas is going to win. So Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State. They said, no, there's going to be an election there. And that's exactly what happened there in the Gaza Strip. And so what you had Hamas, who was saying to people, we're going to provide you food, shelter, things along those lines. We're talking about a territory with about 2 million people, half of them children. 90% of the place doesn't have electricity. You've had the UN Secretary General literally call this an open-air prison. And so folk have to understand really what this area is like and really what is going on here, which explains why Hamas has been able to control the Gaza Strip. Go ahead.
I'll give you an example. Think about the Taliban right now being in charge of Afghanistan. You can say they came to power, but they took it, essentially. So we really are talking about a terrorist organization running the Gaza Strip, but like you said, Roland, with over 2 million people in that area. So when we say they came to power, that's a nice way of saying a lot of people didn't have a lot of choice. They were looking for something different because they were suffering. And so this is very, very typical with a lot of terrorist organizations. They will promise. And in some instances, they will actually do the work. They will actually come and feed you. But they also have these ulterior motives where they want to also enact some level of Sharia law, right? And through force. So that's another part of it. So Palestinian folks have been living under pretty extreme circumstances since 2006.
And you have these competing power centers among the Palestinians. You have the PLO. Yasser Arafat was their leader for a very long time, and they were the traditional group. You've got Hamas, which some may call the militant wing, and so you have folks at odds. Now we're seeing stories out of Israel saying that Netanyahu wanted to isolate the PLO, and then support is being driven to Hamas to be able to then, frankly, crush both.
Exactly, because one of the things, and Hamas has been very clear about this, they want part of Jerusalem. They want they want the Palestinian state to be recognized. They want the state of Palestine, and a big piece of that is Jerusalem. So I kind of want to fast forward to 2017 when the embassy was moved to Jerusalem. Hamas was not happy with that. They were not happy with the Trump administration at all. So that's kind of like a starting point.
And hold up, before you go there, you had many white conservative, white evangelical Christians here in the United States who wanted that to happen as well. And so what you have here, you have this very interesting alliance going on where you have white evangelicals who are strongly backing that and pushing that, where you had a number of folks who are Jewish who were sort of like, is this really a major deal? And so that was, again, one of those conflicting issues where you had folks on multiple sides. You're like, well, why are y'all pushing this thing so diligently?
Right. And I am not a biblical scholar. Yes, I did go to divinity school, but I leave that to my colleagues who know more about that, where that really goes all the way back. That's a biblical textual argument.
Right.
A lot of evangelicals will stand 10 toes down on. They really will. And they see Jerusalem as being the crowning jewel, right? So when the embassy was moved to Jerusalem, you're right, there were a lot of evangelicals, not just white ones, a lot of evangelicals were very happy about that, but Hamas was not happy about that at all, because they see that as part of the legitimate state of Palestine. So that tension in 2017, we are seeing an escalation.
Right.
And on top of that, the Abraham Accords. So there's this process of normalizing Israel. And what I mean by that is for other states in the Middle East to recognize Israel as a sovereign state. And so the normalization process that a lot of people are talking about, there's a lot of mis and disinformation around Iran. There are a lot of conspiracy theories being drawn together. But the gist of it is that there was a critical piece of normalization that was happening with Saudi Arabia. So some of these, the way that people are weaving stories together is to say that, well, Hamas definitely is interested in destabilizing the region. I mean, you don't attack unless your goal is to destabilize, right? And so a lot of people are saying that 2017, with moving the embassy to Jerusalem, coupled with normalization, recognizing Israel as a sovereign state, are the sparks that really pushed Hamas to this extreme point. So that is a point of view.
Right.
Things are still unfolding. We're still finding out information. But I want to make one thing very clear. Roland, you mentioned mis and disinformation earlier. There are a lot of stories out there about Iran having direct involvement in helping this happen. We do not have evidence of that. First and foremost.
Right. Hold on one second, because the reason I want to really hit that point. First of all, I'm going to go to a break. We come back. I want to deal with that. Because when President Biden spoke yesterday, he was attacked by a lot of right-wing folks. He didn't mention Iran. They were behind this. These are the same people who were yelling Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. We've also seen these reports saying that Hamas has beheaded 40 some odd children, but then we're hearing from official folks in Israel that cannot be confirmed. So it's a whole lot of stuff that's being thrown out. It has not helped because Elon Musk, they're not his ex, also Twitter, they're not even stopping a lot of the stuff. So really people right now are saying a lot of things are happening that are actually not. And so I want to pick up when we come back on that. Just want to walk people through. And I want to talk about, again, and I want you to give people an understanding why the United States has historically stood so steadfast with Israel. And then we're going to also get into why do you have this relationship, this alliance, if you will, between a lot of African Americans and the Palestinians. And so people need to understand there's a whole lot of things here at play. Geopolitics, American politics, yes, oppression, racism, you name it, all these things are happening. And right now, so many people are now being sort of pushed into a corner where people are saying, all right, who are you with? It's either Israel On the Palestinians, you can't be for both. And you've got celebrities who are getting in trouble. You got people, universities. It's all members of Congress. It's all sorts of drama that's being laid out. And so we just want to unpack some people so our folks, have the accurate, proper information.
Well, it's good to be back in Charleston, but I want to just first of all say a few words about what's happening in Israel right now. And needless to say, I'm completely outraged by what has taken place. We are looking at extreme acts of terrorism that must be condemned in no uncertain terms. There is absolutely no justification for terrorism. The President and I take very seriously our commitment to Israel and to the people of Israel, to support them, and in particular to give Israel what it needs to defend itself. One of our highest priorities, of course, is the safety and well-being of American citizens, and that will continue to be among our highest priorities. It is also critically important that, as we have been, we will stay in constant communication and contact with our allies, with our Israeli partners, with members of Congress, as we have been doing in these last few days. In fact, this morning, I was on a call that the President was on with Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is now one of many calls that have taken place, to restate our commitment that is unwavering to stand with Israel and the Israeli people. So thank you.
All right, that was Vice President Kamala Harris today. We go back to our guest, Dr. Nola Haynes, national security expert. Nola, for people who don't understand the relationship between the United States and Israel, very close. We send Israel billions of dollars annually.
Yeah. This relationship goes all the way back to 1948. We were the first country to recognize Israel as a state. They are our security partner and ally. They believe in democratic values, and a relationship is very, very strong.
And when you say our security partner, folks have to understand, we rely on Israel and the relationship and intelligence when it comes to many of those other countries in the Middle East that don't have democracies, and for many of them, they have been enemies of Israel. And vice versa.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And a large part of it is a new-ish state. And what I mean by that is the Middle East is very, very old. History means a great deal in the Middle East. There's this saying that the Middle East never forgets, that it knows its history. So you have a newly formed state where Palestinians believe is their land, like Native Americans here believe that much of this country, if not all, belongs to them. It is something very similar. So you have this new state forming, and then you have the United States that is coming off of winning World War II and pretty much destroying two countries in Japan. You have this new emerging superpower backing Israel. So who's going to go up against that country?
And again, what you had here was you had a country that was created because you had European Jews who were being killed in Germany, and so it was the creation, frankly, of their own country, a homeland for them. And then you have Palestinians who are saying, "Wait a minute, you're taking our homeland, our land, to create a land for them." And then again, you had Jewish, Muslim. Now all of a sudden, you've got the back and forth, and that literally has been the battle. Whose land is it? Who owns it? And then when you throw in those white conservatives, the white evangelicals, their whole deal is, wait a minute, that land originally belonged to Israel. And so you've got all of these conflicting things going. And so the United States has been trying to pursue this two-state solution. President Jimmy Carter, every American president has been trying to actually negotiate that for the longest. And some say we came very close at times, but the reality is you still have two folks who are at odds over the same territory.
Exactly. It's really simple as it's history, stupid. right? It's one of those moments. Again, history means a great deal in the Middle East, and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homeland. And Jerusalem is such a huge piece to this narrative, and that really is the crowning jewel for both Israel and for Palestinians, right? So it's the crowning jewel for Christians, for Jews, and for Muslims. So that part of the world, that specific place holds sway for various reasons for different Abrahamic religious groups. So there's that part. I cannot state that any more clearly, how theology and religion is wrapped up into this and how it gets warped and how it gets used and weaponized. So that's one part of it.
And let me say this here, because I love when these idiots think I'm not following what they're saying. Somebody's like, oh, Roland's trying to play it safe. No, it's called facts. So the problem is, it's a whole bunch of people out here who are black, who are white, or whatever, who actually have no idea what the hell they're talking about. They have no understanding of this region, no understanding of the history, don't understand how we even got to this point. They can't tell you the difference between Hamas and Hezbollah or any of those things. And so, yeah, what we're not going to do is we're not going to sit here and go through hysterics. We're going to actually give folks critical information. Now, to that particular point, before we went to the break, you said there's been no confirmation that Iran has been involved in this. The Wall Street Journal had a story that dropped a couple of days ago, crediting sources as saying that Iran helped Hamas plan this. But Israeli intelligence and American intelligence have not been able to confirm this. And that story dropped, and then what happened? Folks ran with it. It was like, oh, there you go, Iran was involved.
See, I don't like people who instigate and play with fire and then try to hide their hands, because this is serious. You know, we're not playing around here. You know, you come out with allegations like that, you need to have evidence to back it up. So what I know is there is no evidence yet to confirm that. Now, with that said, does that mean that Iran has not been complicit in terms of, you know, funding terrorist activities, partnering with Hamas? I'm not saying that. Regarding this specific situation, there is no evidence. And then another story that is out there that is also disinformation so far is about Hezbollah in Lebanon. There's a story that's...
Hold on. Before you even go there, again, for folk who are clueless, who don't know, what is Hezbollah?
Hezbollah is another Hamas-like organization out of Lebanon. You know, I want to say this, Roland. I've studied terrorism for a very long time. And one of the things that has been swirling around, a question over the last couple of years, you know, has terrorism retreated, or do we still need to worry about it? Well, what happened a few days ago, clearly we still need to worry about it, right? And so I was one of the people out there saying terrorism has not gone away, but I was looking more at Afghanistan and Western Africa. And I will admit, you know, this Hamas strike has definitely taken everyone by surprise. But because Hamas has done what it's done, and they have had different partnerships with different terrorist organizations in the region, people are also bringing Hezbollah and Lebanon into the mix too.
I'm glad you said that, because there was a lot of criticism of U.S. Officials by saying, hey, the Middle East is quiet. It has been. I mean, really, what you heard a lot in the Middle East were the protests in Israel when it came to Netanyahu trying to change the judiciary there. You had massive protests happening there. For the longest, it was quiet. So the reason this has blown folks away, because it seemingly came out of nowhere, and then you've had Israeli and American intelligence officials say they didn't even see this coming.
You know, it reminds me of the beginning of Russia-Ukraine, and people said that it kind of came out of nowhere, although we had very good intelligence saying that it was going to happen. My analysis of that is, I think in many ways we stopped paying attention. You know, we stopped listening. And when you think
so, because it wasn't hot button, because it wasn't on fire, it was like, oh, we're all good, everything's cool.
Exactly. And again, I'll give Putin as an example. Putin had been saying all along he wanted the former USSR to be, you know, to go back to its former glory. He had been talking smack about Ukraine for a while. He thinks that Ukraine is beneath Russia, that they belong under the boot of Russia. He's made these statements, but how seriously did we take this, right? Even with this massive intel failure, with Hamas attacking Israel in over 20 different locations, 20. That is extreme on any measure for any measurement that exists in the world. And we're still getting information about that intelligence failure, but a lot of this is ego, right? Because there was an assessment made that terrorism had retreated, that terrorism was not the thing to look at. Many indicators said that what we should be looking at is not global terrorism, but proliferation of WMD. There was some information out there that was saying that. So, you know, I don't have the full story yet. I don't know what contributed to the intel failure, but somebody took their eye off the ball. So a lot of somebodies took their eyes off the ball, right? Because for more than 20 locations to be attacked in Israel, that's a lot of planning. That's a lot of chit chat going on somewhere. Somebody's having conversations. Somebody's convening people together. So the massive intel failure, just like with 9/11, this will be talked about and studied for a very long time because this is unprecedented.
Before I go to break, then go to my panel, I got to ask you this here. We keep seeing these stories that 40 children were beheaded, but I'm also hearing that it's not been confirmed. What do you know?
That is not confirmed.
So this, again, and for people to understand, when a story like that just gets thrown out there, what it creates in the mind of people, oh, these people are so heinous, do whatever you want to them. So so again, we keep seeing it, and in fact, I've seen some stories where initially journalists say, oh, they actually saw the bodies. Now those media companies are backing off of those initial reports.
Right. And Roland, something you asked me earlier, it's meant to dehumanize Hamas. Obviously, what they did was disgusting and terrible, but it's not meant just to dehumanize Hamas. But when people put Hamas and all of Palestinians together, it's meant to do that, right? So it's meant to think of them as being all of Palestinians, I mean, in terms of being savage, in terms of being extreme. And when you dehumanize anyone, it is a lot easier to go and kill them. Right. So what Hamas did was disgusting and heinous on every single level. But the one thing that I do want to say, the one thing that I know is also very important to this administration is recognizing the difference between what Hamas did and Palestinians just trying to live their lives every single day. That is a distinction that this administration is standing on. And I'm happy that they are, because it is a distinction. And for people that are saying, well, they voted them in, well, you can't call them a terrorist organization today and not yesterday. So either they are and they have been, which is to say, I'm sure there was a lot of, they were elected in, right? They got elected. So you can't just make up that they're a terrorist organization just today, right? Without following that thread. So yes, they are technically in power, but there are a lot of everyday Palestinians who just want to live their lives, and they in no way deserve what's happening to them.
It has been a whole lot of discussion, Larry, everywhere about how people are responding. You got celebrities and organizations and people issuing statements, and who do you stand with? You're standing with Israel or standing with the Palestinians. You got people who are saying, how dare you not condemned Hamas? How dare you not condemn Israel? A lot of people have been talking about this here. Black Lives Matter Chicago posted this, and this was, of course, this image right here. I stand with Palestine. That is all. That is it. And of course, people were very critical because some of the Hamas folks who flew in to a concert there flew in as paragliders. So folks have found this to be extremely insensitive. They've been blasting them. Then you had the people who have been saying, well, this represents, all of Black Lives Matter. Well, that's not true, because the Black Lives Matter grassroots folks issued their own statement. The Black Lives Matter Global Network, go to my iPad, where they said that BLM Chicago is not affiliated with Black Lives Matter Global Network. And this is one of the things that happens, Larry, when and this is one of the problems that Black Lives Matter has had. People, again, who carry the name BLM Chicago, but they're not actually part of the group. It's sort of like having a group calling themselves the NAACP chapter. They're not tied to the actual NAACP. The people are blasting the entire Black Lives Matter movement. You've got universities where you got students that are releasing statements as part of organizations. Then you got folks like Bill Ackman, the billionaire, saying, oh, let's out all of these students so we don't hire them. And so you got a lot of people, Larry, who are like, you know what? I'm not going to say a damn thing because, frankly, if I take any position, it ain't helping me.
Yeah, you made some excellent points. First of all, I'm glad you had Dr. Haynes on. I follow on Twitter, so she provided some really excellent analysis on a very complex issue. And look, Roland, I worked on a number of issues relating to Israel, other foreign affairs issues when I worked on Capitol Hill. And as you, in your previous conversation, highlights, this is a very complex issue. And I think when it comes to the age of social media, there's a lesson a lot of people haven't learned, and it's that you can just remain silent. Not everyone has the expertise to talk about complex foreign affairs issues. And as you talked about, some universities have posted comments, obviously a lot of policymakers and celebrities, et cetera. And in some cases, many cases, those individuals just stay silent because they don't have an understanding of the complex issue, as Dr. Haynes just talked about the last several decades. But also, like I said, you can go further back than that to talk about these issues relating to the region. The other thing I want to talk about, Roland, you mentioned is BLM in Chicago. Once again, this idea to remain silent and just kind of when you're not an expert, when this is not your area or expertise, just to stay out of it and let those who study these issues relating to foreign affairs and understand the Middle East, to let them have a general conversation about what's going on. The other thing I want to highlight, Roland, as it relates to BMLA and Chicago and that statement they put out, it feeds the flame of right-wingers and those who are anti-Black to once again give one example of an entity who puts out a statement on social media to highlight why Black Lives Matter, the organization itself doesn't matter, and obviously trying to assert that they want to affiliate themselves with terrorism, which we know is not accurate. But overall, once again, this issue is relating to what's happening in Israel right now. It's a complex issue, and it needs context. And that's why I'm so happy that you had Dr. Haynes on, because members of the Black community, in particular on social media, talk about this issue, and a lot of folks have no idea what they're talking about.
But the thing here, Rebecca, is that there are people who have been highly critical of Israel and their treatment of the Palestinian people. You have folks who say, guess what? They have a right to fight back. Jimmy Carter wrote a book calling what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, calling it apartheid. A lot of people took offense to that as well. You have significant emotions. But I think if you strip all of that away, here is, for me, how you look at it. Death is death. And so Hamas attacks Israel. People at a concert, you see the stories of them storming kibbutz, killing people in their homes, the videos that are being taken. And then, of course, how Israel responds, killing Palestinians. Right now, more than 2,300 people are dead. I wouldn't be celebrating anybody or anything. Death is death. This is pain. This is suffering. And family members are having to deal with this, whether you are Palestinian or Israeli.
What we're watching is simply unattainable. There's so much that's happening so fast. There's so much misinformation. There's disinformation. And just to remind your viewers, this is one of the most highly concentrated areas on the planet, the most population-wise dense. Something else that's also an issue is that there currently isn't an ambassador to Israel from the United States. So that also hinders us from having an adequate response and actually having that information gathering that's so important, especially in the first few days of this conflict. The other issue, taking a step back and watching this, is it is disheartening as I'm listening to U.S. officials talk about what's happening. I'm waiting to hear about the talk about peace. How do we back up? How do we move away from the precipice that we're currently at, where the whole region can devolve into further negative consequences? How do we actually just slow down, let tempers go back down in order to figure out what is the solution? What are the constructive things that can happen next? And so, what I'm concerned is that in the U.S., we're playing politics with this issue. With, like you said, there are so many innocent people on all sides who are being unjudiciously murdered, slaughtered, killed, reports of raping, reports of all sorts of atrocities. And I think all of us need to take a step back, let this cool down just a moment so we can figure out what is the peaceful way forward, because what's happening now is not sustainable. Regardless of how people feel the response should be, we can't do this for the next week, the next months, the next years. We have to figure out a way forward.
But the reality, Scott, that is Israel has made it perfectly clear. They are going to destroy anybody tied to Hamas, and that is actually happening. And they're leveling in any building where Hamas may be in.
Yeah, with the U.S., without the U.S., or in spite of the U.S., they're going to go in and turn Gaza to rubble. And, you know, you're right, death is death. Let me just say this, though, because I follow NOLA also. Hamas is not Palestine. Hamas is not Palestinians. And we keep lumping them together. Well, the media does, and even politicians do. And I say that because then that leads to this question. I understand, never again, that Israel uses, and this is one of those never again moments in 2023, but we got to be strategic and surgical when you turn Gaza to rubble. You have innocent people there. You have women and children there. You have hostages there. How do they get out? You got to go in and find them if you can, but you've got to give them the pathway out. There are 3 ways out of Gaza, and I believe Israel has shut down 2 of those 3. And if they have, there's only one way. You've got to give those people time to get out if you're going to turn it to rubble. If you don't, you are doing, if you go in indiscriminately and say to hell with everyone and everybody, then you're just repeating this cycle of violence. I understand that Israel is going to do what they're going to do, right? And emotionally, I don't blame them. But in the end, once we turn Gaza to rubble, where do we go from there? And you see, this dialogue now is about revenge. Got it. But as soon as you get through that, right, and we honor the dead and we mourn the dead, we still got a big-ass problem in the Middle East. And maybe this triggers some type of resolution. But I got to tell you, there's a lot of violence on both sides. And you can't resolve or settle a conflict as long as bombs are being dropped on all sides. And so the other thing is, we got to, if you're critical of Israel in the U.S., right, they label you anti-Semitic. It has always bothered me that there is blame to go on both sides. There's tit for tat on both sides. But if you criticize Israel, you criticize them in any way, shape, or form, white America and others will label you anti-Semitic. We got to stop that because both sides have to take some responsibility. And this rhetoric and the media and what have you is really harmful when you talk about beheading kids, because President Biden said, I didn't think I'd see the day where terrorists were beheading children, right? So now he's put that out there. You just ran that clip, actually. And so that's dangerous rhetoric. And we just got to get past this revenge piece and Gaza being laid to rubble. And the real question we need to be talking about is twofold. And I'll end on this. Where do we go from here, right? And how did this happen? Because Hamas may have representatives who run Gaza, right? But Hamas is a terrorist organization. Those Palestinians there may have voted for them, but that doesn't make them liable for Hamas's actions and brutality in what we've just observed this past week.
Final comment from you, Nola, and that is this. Frankly, right now, ain't nobody talking about peace. At the end of the day, right now, Nola, It is it is absolute brutal retribution, and it is war.
Yeah, no, on site, like for real. But I will say two things about diplomacy. So, in terms of where do the Palestinians go, there are over 100,000 Palestinians right now in UN shelters. But as you noted earlier, Roland, there are about 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza alone, right? So Egypt has said that they will not let Palestinians in. Now, there are ongoing diplomatic talks with Egypt to hopefully get them to change their minds, essentially. Qatar, they are also negotiating to help get women and young folks out of Gaza safely. So there are diplomatic efforts that are happening. Actually, right now, the Secretary of State is in Israel. He's in Israel and Jordan today through the 13th. So there are diplomatic talks that are happening. Diplomacy is going to be a huge part of this. In terms of peace, Roland, as you stated, that's if it's not on Israel's mind, it's not going to be on the U.S.'s mind. It's a similar situation with Ukraine. If it's not on Zelensky's mind, then it's not on the U.S.'s mind. You know, we will absolutely continue to support Israel like we've always done. We have a security package on the way right now, and I'm sure Congress will probably vote to have more security packages sent to Israel as long as this takes. And unfortunately, this is right now, the policy is pretty much as long as it takes. So I know that can sound disheartening. And in the world that I exist in, arms control and international security, the level of idealism exists in the diplomacy space. And because the U.S. is not directly involved in either war, it's up to what Israel wants to do and whatever Ukraine wants to do. And that really is the truth of it. As soon as there's a moment turning towards peace, you best believe that there will be people all over that, because people are already thinking about it. They're writing policies around it. There are people who are wanting peace and who are thinking about peace. But as long as Netanyahu says on site, as long as Zelensky says on site, that's what it's going to be.
The war continues in Israel, between Israel and Hamas. You have Israel saying that the folks who live in Gaza, 1.1 million people should leave Gaza. A lot of people saying, wait a minute, this is going to cause even more problems, saying that how do you just move 1 million people out of the way? President Joe Biden gave a speech today in Philadelphia where he did talk about what is happening there in the Middle East. Check this out.
I also want to say a word about the situation in Israel. The more we learn about the attack, the more horrifying it becomes. More than 1,000 innocent lives lost, including at least 27 Americans. These guys make Al-Qaeda look pure. They're pure evil. As I said from the beginning, the United States, make no mistake about it, stands with Israel. The United States stands with Israel. Secretary of State Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and Secretary of Defense Austin is there today. We're making sure Israel has what it needs to defend itself and respond to these attacks. It's also a priority for me to urgently address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. At my direction, our teams are working in the region, including communicating directly with the governments of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and other Arab nations, and the United Nations to surge support and humanitarian consequences for Hamas attack to help Israel. You know, we can't lose sight of the fact that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians had nothing to do with Hamas and Hamas's appalling attacks, and they're suffering as a result as well. This morning, I spoke with the family members of all those Americans who are still unaccounted for on a Zoom call for about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. They're going through agony, not knowing what the status of their sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children are. You know, it's gut-wrenching. I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families. We're working round the clock to secure the release
So, Matt, Michael, I want to go to you. Michael, I'll start with you first. This is, it is just, it's interesting watching all of these different things unfold. One, I saw a post earlier that I thought was kind of interesting. Give me 1 second. I want to mention this, where Axios had this story that the State Department has said there's certain things that cannot. So here it is. It says, Scoop, this is a senior foreign correspondent for the HuffPost. Hours after Israel ordered an exodus in Gaza, State Department officials circulated internal warnings against three phrases: de-escalation, ceasefire, end to violence, bloodshed, restoring calm. Why in the hell would we want not those things discussed?
So I'm not certain why. I know we have multiple things taking place at the same time, okay? I'm glad President Joe Biden talked about the humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza because, to be quite frank with you, from looking at mainstream media, it appears they value the lives of Israelis more than they value the lives of the 2.2 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. And they are living under like segregation-like conditions or oppression coming from Israel, okay? You have Israel dropping leaflets into Gaza saying for 1 million Palestinians to leave Gaza, but they really don't have anywhere to go for 1 million of them to leave. Even though some of them are trying to leave, they're trying to go south. They really don't have anywhere for 1 million to go. This is, I was talking to somebody earlier today about this. This looks like this is about to be another Crusades, which was started out in 1096 AD between the Christians and the Muslims, okay, over control of what they call the Holy Land in Jerusalem. This is about to be a bloodshed. Now, Joe Biden and, quite frankly, the Biden administration, I think, got criticism early on by not having a full-throated distinction between the 2.2 million Palestinians who are being oppressed and Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. And what I mean by that is so much attention was on Hamas attacking Israel, but what was lacking was a history for about the past 56 years between Israel and the Palestinians, okay? And you have a humanitarian crisis going on in the Gaza Strip. One UN person or ambassador has referred to the Gaza Strip as an open-air prison. So now more information is starting to come out about what's taking place in Gaza. But this is going to be tremendous bloodshed coming.
Yeah, and here's the deal, Matt. I mean, this is the thing for me that is, I just sort of sit here and I'm go, what are we talking about here? The reality is this here. Death is death.
Yes.
And if the whole point of a ceasefire, the whole point of ending the violence is to prevent death. And I think what's happening is, and I saw a story earlier that talked about this here, there is such a lust, a thirst for retribution. And I get it. 5,000 rockets come raining down. You want to do that, but that's gonna lead to response, and then another counter response, and the counter response, and the counter response. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about people who are being shipped out and moved out. Hamas has controlled Gaza since the election in 2006. There hasn't been one since. So this notion that all the Palestinians stand behind Hamas, you heard Biden say that, that's not true, but there's just this attitude of, hell, just open the gates of hell and unleash everything. And you talk about mutual self-destruction. Or sorry, mutual destruction. You fired me, I fired you, I fired back, you fired back, and then it never ends.
Yeah, and I think you asked a particularly astute question. Why are there internal emails saying we're not going to use terms like ceasefire and other things that seem to be the focus, should be the focus of anybody involved in policy or in defense, right, is staving off the number of lives that are lost. But I think if we look at it in the larger context of the fact that this particular conflict is the one that is most difficult for anyone in the United States of America to talk about for fear of being labeled one way or the other. Mainstream media, to Michael's point, is everything I've seen has been about nothing but the number of Israelis who have been lost. And you're exactly right. Death is death. It is abhorrent, no matter whose life is lost. But the reality is this geopolitical issue has hugely complicated origins and will continue to be complicated going forward. And even that lumping together of Palestinians with Hamas as though, those aren't distinct contingencies, one of which may not be completely supportive of the other, with Palestinians not being Hamas, is crucially important. But we don't find that level of nuance in this conversation. And what I always find particularly difficult in this instance is, he's the president, so naturally he has to talk about the number of Americans lost. But when you have thousands of people dying, it seems that if America is involved in this conflict, our primary focus should be how do we stop more people from dying, rather than purely being in lockstep with one of the combatants, with Israel. And I think, if that's the government's policy, then that's fine, but that should be overridden by all efforts to make sure that we don't have continued loss of life. So I think that the media has to be more truthful about how it's playing this and how it is portraying it. And I understand people's fear about not being anti-Semitic or any other kind of label. But if we don't talk about the issues and all of the attendant issues, honestly, then we can't meaningfully have conversations about how the United States can help make sure that people on both sides aren't losing their lives.
This is the homepage to HuffPost. Stunning U.S. memo, don't call for de-escalation in Gaza. Also, the Israeli president said all Gazans responsible for attack. Seriously, how 2.2 million people in Gaza, Michael. How do you make the claim that, they're all responsible for the attack? What this sounds like, this just gives us license to destroy it all and everyone.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. Our sister, Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, she talks about cognitive dissonance, and she talks about for you to dehumanize another people, you have to put negative pejorative terms on these people to reduce their humanity, to then justify mistreating them. And this is what it appears is taking place now by trying to lump all of the 2.2 million Palestinians in who Israel has been oppressing for years. Let's make that clear. Okay, it's the same way African Americans were segregated and oppressed by white people here in this country. This is what's taking place now by the Israeli government. Now, I also make a distinction most of the time between what the government is doing and what the everyday citizens feel and what they're doing, because sometimes there's congruency, but oftentimes there's a disconnect between how the government is oppressing the people in another country and how the everyday citizens of that oppressive country, act. But this is how you set up a people for mass extermination. You put negative terms on them in the media to then justify and reduce the desire for other nations to come to their aid. And lastly, there has also been a call from reports I've seen. I think New York Times had an article about this. There has also been a call for all of the Arab, I can't remember if they said Arab nations or Muslims, however they put it, to rise up as well. Okay, and once again, this I think this is going to be another crusade, and it's going to be bloodier and more people dead than the previous 8 crusades.
Peace, I'm Faraji Muhammad, host of The Culture. And brothers, we need to talk. There's been much discussion about the state of the black man in our community. Whether it's in politics, education, or in the home, my brothers, we are struggling to lead the way, which is why The Culture will be hosting the Black Men Summit, where we'll be redefining and celebrating black manhood. This special series will kick off on the 28th anniversary of the historic Million Man March. on Monday, October the 16th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be talking to some of Black America's most prolific, dynamic, thought-provoking Black men activists, scholars, and leaders about our role, our power, and our future. So tune in and join the conversation as an online culture crew member for the Culture's Black Men Summit, redefining and celebrating Black manhood. Starting Monday, October 16th through Friday, October 20th, 4 p.m. Eastern Time each day, right here, exclusively here on the Black Star Network.